I was president of Sony Computer Entertainment Europe at the time that PlayStation was launched, and of course when Tomb Raider first appeared on the scene. We didn't know too much about it. We heard the name first and thought it was kind of an interesting name, and then heard that there was a girl in it, the star, with a big adventure through caves and encountering some pretty scary creatures. But beyond that, we didn't know too much. We thought it was kind of interesting. There was a lead character, heroine, but beyond that, we waited to see what would happen. And of course, the rest is history. Well, we thought it was exciting. There was mystery, there was intrigue. The idea of going into caves and through ruins was not a common thing in games. And especially with her kit, you know, and her health meter, and the challenges she was facing, and the fact that she was a girl, it just captured the imagination, and it was a lot of fun to play for everybody, not only guys but girls too.
Well, I hadn't actually worked on any professional games whatsoever at that point. I've been programming since I was 13, but I basically was straight out of university. I'd actually stayed on at university. I did an engineering degree. And I realised I didn't want to be an engineer. So then I did a PhD and I did kind of artificial intelligence. Spent a lot of that time actually playing games and thinking, actually, maybe there's something I could do here. You know, games were getting more sophisticated, I thought. So I applied for a few jobs in the games industry at the end of that, thinking, oh, maybe they want someone who can do AI. And Core was one of the places that interviewed me. And yeah, I took the job and came along. So although I'd written a few sort of simple games in my spare time, they were nothing like the kind of thing that, you know, you do in the professional games industry. So it was my first job, basically, in the games industry.
With regard to the movie deal for the property, Paramount stepped up and made a very aggressive deal. Their intention from the get-go was to make the movie. They made an aggressive deal. And so there's an aspect of the deal that seems to come up. I've read about a lot online, and it's been covered in the press a little bit about the controls that IDOS had, there were three stipulations in the deal that IDOS was concerned about. They were, and I remember two of them. I don't remember the third. One, no full frontal nudity, and Lara couldn't be seen smoking a cigarette. I don't remember what the third was, but none of them seemed like impediments to bring the character to the screen and making a good movie.
We've brought Toby Gard back on for Tomb Raider Anniversary to help flesh out the storyline from the original game. The original Tomb Raider had an interesting storyline, but it was one that was slightly obscured by just the production qualities that they had at the time. As it's been a decade, we've had time to improve our storytelling techniques, and so with Tomb Raider Anniversary, we were really trying to flesh out the original storyline, provide more backstory for all the characters, and sort of show the players what the motivation is for all the characters, so they really understand how deep the original story was, and sort of it's the final retelling of it to its full fruition, you know, full extent of what we wanted to say in the original but couldn't. It was very important. I mean, I think anytime you're going back and working with a franchise as popular and pervasive as Tomb Raider, you really need to get back to the core of what made it popular in the first place. And Toby Gard was definitely the part of that. So we really wanted to bring him on to help us, you know, understand what made Lara who she is, why everything happened in the original, and sort of fill in all the blanks that were left out by the story in the original.
I think Lara is an emotional creature, and for a variety of different reasons in her history, she's learned to suppress emotion and take over with action and being very action-oriented. But she's trying to find something, she's trying to express something. So from my point of view, she is an emotional creature, and my job, I think, is to try to complement that. On top of that, of course, you've got all the action, the exploration, all that stuff going on, which is, of course, my job as well. But I think my relationship to her is to make her to bring that, like, emotional connection between her and the player. So, because like, Lara is strange in a sense, because you as a player needs to feel empowered playing her. you are Lara, right? And I think for me, when I use the music, I breathe emotion into the game, but also into the player, and then feels they are Lara, right? It's a kind of weird paradox, like we're trying to make somebody else feel that character. It's kind of schizophrenic in that sense. But that's what I do. Music is, no matter how you put it, music is about emotion, and for me, even though it's a professional trait for me, I get emotional. I need to do that, and all composers I know are emotional creatures. There's no way around it. It's not like I go around and cry all the time, but I probably spend more time thinking about emotions than most people do, because that's what I'm trying to express, essentially. Music is about emotion. Music without emotion is pretty boring.
Oh, you know, I think it's impossible to have singly one memory from a game that's been so phenomenal. You know, it's changed my life. This thing has been a life change for me. It made me more successful than most people even dream of. At one stage of my life, I felt like I was a movie star. It was just unbelievable. So it's really hard to pick one element. I think getting out of a stretch limo in LA to the premiere of the first movie and going down the red carpet with Angelina Jolie was kind of up there for sure. Admittedly, there are many cameras pointed at me. They're all going, "Who's he?" But it's so difficult to pick out one moment. The whole thing was kind of just phenomenal.
It was great in terms of, here was a studio the size of Paramount willing to back a movie based on our character to a production cost of around about $90–100 million. Not only were they doing that, they were also agreeing to give us a percentage of box office receipts. And of course, this is our intellectual property, so we owned all the rights. So we were, for once, getting licensing money from a Hollywood studio as opposed to having to pay that studio for using their rights. So this was quite a dramatic reverse in the relationship between film studios and games companies. And it was great that we could, make some of our own demands, and they were fulfilled. We had to make sure that the integrity of the character of Lara Croft was maintained. We didn't want to sell out just for a bit of short-term exploitation. So we had that veto, but when it came to the cast, we didn't use it, because when Paramount, or rather Larry Gordon, said, "How about Angelina Jolie as Lara Croft?" we said, "That's okay with us." We realized that Lara Croft had a lot of fans, and fans always want to meet their hero or heroine, and of course they couldn't meet the digital Lara. So we decided we'd have a female representation of Lara, which would change year on year, so people didn't get too close to one particular girl. And that was mainly for trade shows, for opening, for PR, for anything to do with the media. We always had provided one wonderful Lara Croft, and I must say I enjoyed every minute of that interviewing process. A Lara Croft model has to be Lara Croft, basically. Has to look like her, speak like her, act like her, think like her, and be as athletic as she can be, if possible, if needs be. She can't disappoint. She can't do anything that would make a consumer think, that's not my Lara. My Lara wouldn't do that. So she really has to be absolutely in part. So these days we do train the models to become Lara Croft with athletic training, fighting, elocution, deportment, everything that is Lara, the Lara model is for that year.
I loved it. When I basically first arrived, I was definitely really there. New job, never been in the game industry. I was worried, that would I be able to hack it, basically. You see all these games and thought, could I actually do that? And there I was suddenly being told that, I wasn't just going to be writing high score tables or something simple to sort of get into it. I was literally going to be writing half this game along with, Paul Douglas, who was the other programmer on it. So it was very exciting, and actually I just loved it. For the first 6 months or so, I just thought I was the luckiest man in the world. I was doing my hobby for a job and getting paid for it. Great, how good is this? So I don't know, I sort of quickly realised that actually there was no magic, black magic behind the way games were made, that you know, the ideas that I had were as valid as anyone else's ideas, and that people were just working this stuff out as they went along, which is, I think, part of the excitement of the games industry is that you always come out with new things because you're always trailblazing. So that's what makes it a fun place for a programmer or an artist to be.
To build the movie around a strong female lead was a lot of fun, and it was a challenge because so many people told us it couldn't be done or it wouldn't succeed. And that was one of the many reasons that, one of the reasons that so many studios shied away from the project, because they kept on pointing to, and they kept on looking for precedents in the action genre, in the action adventure genre, where a female lead was featured. And it was somehow assumed that it just wouldn't work. And we never had any doubt, and we knew that it was a great opportunity to actually do something that was a little bit unprecedented in Hollywood, and it was a great thing to there are some really committed fans to the games and to the there are some really committed fans to the games and to the movies, and a lot of the fans are young women who had never had the opportunity to see a woman in that kind of role, and they were, and the reaction to that was really exciting.
Yeah, well, actually, the reality is TR1 is my favourite one of the franchise, mainly because, I mean, it was very much like my baby, really, and then I think that we had so much space at that point because it hadn't been explored. The whole concept, it was a blank slate for us. So we were able to pull in like a lot of good ideas, and all of the ideas were new and fresh. There wasn't a situation, you know, as the games went on, you know, there are certain things you can't do anymore. You know, the obvious stuff is kind of being used up already. And in TR1, we just had this massive open area that we could just pull on to create, you know, whatever we fancied, and it was very exciting to just be able to jam as much as possible in that first game, and I think that's why it stands out for me anyway.
So the inspiration of the game, it was twofold. Obviously, that you've got the Indiana Jones type influence, but a game that Toby was a big fan of was Prince of Persia, the early version, not the more recent one, which had very nice animation. He was an animator, and he just wanted to do a sort of 3D version of this smoothly animating. And in that game, the character runs around and jumps across things and has to avoid traps. So he was kind of combining the two things. So those are really the inspiration. I think Indiana Jones, well, just the basic idea, that first part of the first movie, where he goes in and the ball rolls down after you. I mean, we had a little homage to that in the game. One of the levels had a ball, you know, we had the rolling balls that came after you and things like that. It was that kind of thing. It was just, that was a cool idea, leaping around inside a tool, swinging about the place and avoiding the spikes and things. So those are the real influences.
I think the reason we attempted to kill Lara off was because we really thought we'd exhausted what we could do with the franchise, you know, on that machine, and we were assuming we were moving to the next gen. So, you know, we would all huddle around the machine when they had the scripts, and then they say, "Oh, we've just finished the latest cutscene." So we'd all huddle around the machine and, you know, pass judgment on it. And obviously, seeing Lara falling down a gigantic hole in the middle of the pyramid was quite a joyous moment. So we all, you know, went for a few pints and celebrated the death of Lara. But she came back and got us, you see. So, you know.
I think that there should be a third Tomb Raider movie. I think the license is there, it's now been resurrected, and the success gives it all the attributes for the film company to use as a platform to create a third Tomb Raider movie. So I think it should be done, and let's hope it will be done, because it's a great continuation of the brand franchise as such. What I'd like to see in the Tomb Raider movie in terms of storyline could be a combination of further tasks and adventures that Lara encounters, but also as well maybe flashbacks to where Lara came from, flashbacks to maybe the young Lara Croft, and therefore leading into Lara Croft and Tomb Raider as we know it today. So I think that the franchise lends itself to pre-sequel messages, pre-sequel storylines that can lead into the sequel storylines. But let's hope that there is a third Tomb Raider movie, because I think the franchise is right for it. Angelina and Tomb Raider movies, it's hard to separate them. She's the perfect actress for that movie. And it's really interesting and funny that in market research we've done, we've asked consumers the question, you know, what do you relate Tomb Raider to? And one of the top answers has been Angelina. So she really has done an awesome amount for the brand. So you ask yourself the question, you know, should she be in Tomb Raider 3? Is she right for Tomb Raider 3? I think that she is, and I think it'd be a great continuation story if she does continue to play the role. And let's hope so, because I think it was a fantastic casting by the film company.
I think that the idea came from 10 years, it's been 10 years since making the original Tomb Raider. And I think that the idea started moving around Eidos that they wanted to celebrate it in some way. And then from my point of view, what was interesting about remaking it was the ability to enrich in the original story, which, like, the key is we don't want to change what's going on, what the original story was about. But from my point of view, what's interesting is that people interpret the original story in different ways because it was told so briefly. It was very only lightly covered what the story was. And if you look on Wikipedia, or last time I checked, someone has written what, you know, the synopsis of the TR1 story is, and it's totally wrong. It's just, you know, they've interpreted it utterly differently than what we were trying to actually tell the story to be. So, so this gives us an opportunity to actually tell the story that we were trying to tell in the first place, and also to sort of put a bit more emotional resonance into it. And that actually, to me, is the most interesting reason for doing it.
Oh man, there's a ton of points from the original game that we really want to keep. The way Lara looks, the different locations that she goes to, you know, all the enemies that she fights. There are lots of little things. The way the inventory system worked, the music is a huge part of it. Thankfully, we've got some great people working on recreating the original scores from Tomb Raider again, so that we can get that in. It's all the little nuances, the way that health packs were arranged on dead bodies, so that it gave them sort of a place and it wasn't just some pickup littered around the environment. There's lots of little touches throughout the game, so it's really finding all the tidbits that people remember and trying to get those all in there. It wasn't so much that it had to, things that we really wanted to keep. There's a lot that we wanted to add so much. There wasn't so much we had to get rid of, other than maybe some of the repetition of the way the puzzles worked. There was a lot of switches, and that was about it, switches. So we wanted to keep switches in there because people remember switches, but we really wanted to expand on it and give them more options. So it was really more about adding to it and less so much of taking things away from the original. So we really wanted to give fans of the original some new things with this game. So we've taken all of the gameplay that was there in the original, which was hanging off of ledges and jumping over gaps and fighting these animals with your dual guns, and we've added in a lot of the gameplay from Tomb Raider Legend that people liked. The horizontal poles, climbing vertically up things. We've added the grapple back in, and there was actually a grapple in Tomb Raider 1. It was only in the opening cinematic, but we felt that, you know, Lara had it there in the cinematic. We should give it to her for the whole game, and it's really opened up a whole lot of new gameplay possibilities that we couldn't do before, so it was good. I think fans are expecting a lot out of Anniversary. Both, they're expecting us to create a game that's true to the original game, and also a game that's as fun to play as any other game on the market these days. So really it's a challenge to mixing the old and the new. Well, I know everybody loved the first game, of course, and then as the franchise went along, I think there were choices made that sort of disinterested a lot of the fans, and so there was, a fair amount of change over the course of the franchise. With Tomb Raider Anniversary, we were really trying to get back to the core story about why Lara does what she does and who she is, and tell that in the best way possible. Oh, the biggest challenge of remaking Tomb Raider is remaking Tomb Raider. I mean, the game is huge and has so much nostalgia, just with every aspect of the game, from the way Lara looks to the environments to the music, the combat, all the enemies. Everybody remembers so many of the little pieces of Tomb Raider that made it what it is. So it's really recapturing everything we can from the original and making the new version of the original Tomb Raider as nostalgic as we can, so that people get all of the pieces that they remember out of it.
Well, to be honest with you, we worked so hard towards the end of Tomb Raider that I actually made myself very ill, and I missed the very last couple of weeks of the development because I was kind of laid up in bed. It was a very strange feeling coming out of what had become like more than a full-time job. We just lived at that studio for the end of the game, and actually through most of it. I remember feeling just dazed and confused coming out of the development because it had been such hard work. And then I remember going down to the game shop in the high street and standing in a queue and having like the people both ahead of me and behind me holding copies of the game and talking about how excited they were to be playing it. And it was just this really strange feeling of realizing that, it actually was going to be pretty majorly successful. And then I remember when it reached #1, which took a while actually. It was a slow build to reach #1, and we were like, "Wow, made a #1 game." But then it just stayed there for months and months. It was insane, and it began to just become, difficult to comprehend after that.
My favorite part of the game is probably everyone's favorite part of the game, at least from what I understand from talking to people. It's the T-Rex encounter. It was the moment in the original Tomb Raider that most blew people away. So, in a game that blew people away, it was the event within that game that everybody remembers. So we're doing our best to do it justice in this remake. And the first Tomb Raider was a great game, so you take that and you make it better, you make it modern, you make it, what we can do now with consoles, and you've got a great game that's being made relevant again and fun to play again.
Around the time when we were beginning the process of trying to pitch Tomb Raider core design, Virtua Fighter had just come out on the Sega Saturn. It was the first sort of real 3D console game, and we had one at the company, and I was watching everybody play it, and it was mainly guys at the company at that time, and I was noticing that even though there's sort of 12 characters in Virtua Fighter, and there's only 2 of them were females, most fights, it seemed to me, had like at least one of the fighters was being picked as a girl. And it seemed odd to me that no one was picking up on the fact that guys actually did seem to want to play females in games, because at the time, everybody was saying that it was crazy to try and make a character that wasn't either American or male, So that was how the idea started. When I first pitched Tomb Raider as an idea, it was just really the concept of an Indiana Jones game, because the environments of tombs and ancient ruins lent itself to the level of graphics quality that we had at the time, which is big blocky sorts of landscapes. And so I hadn't really put any time and effort into a character design, and so when I was just pitching it, I just had drawings of a dude. But once the design started moving forward, the idea of going for a female character took over, and Lara was born.
I first became aware of Tomb Raider. I was on holiday with my son, who was very young at the time, and he brought with him a stack of video game magazines, and we were sitting on the beach, and he was reading, and in some of the magazines he had, there was article after article about Tomb Raider, and I started reading them, and the characters seemed it was a fantastic character. I got to play the game. At the same time, I guess IDOS became interested in doing a movie version, and they sent feelers out into Hollywood, and Larry Gordon and I were one of a number of producers who pursued it. We went to a few studios, and ultimately Paramount Pictures were very, very excited and saw the possibilities in the Tomb Raider movie and hopefully a Tomb Raider franchise.
Tomb Raider, I think, helped some of the players in the early days, which were initially hardcore gamers, lighten up a bit, invite their parents in to watch them play, invite their girlfriends or the sisters in to watch them play. And I think it helped create sort of a family experience around the television with a single player being rooted on by their mates or their family. And, you know, again, it's the kind of thing that makes something go from a niche product to a must-have global entertainment device. And so Tomb Raider's up there with the characters that made that happen. A success like Tomb Raider becomes sort of the holy grail of anybody setting out to write a game. They know that something has changed the world the way Tomb Raider did. They know that something has sold and made a lot of money for its creators the way Tomb Raider did, and they all aspire to that. There have been a few that have come along and moved in that direction in the subsequent generations. But Tomb Raider has now expanded both PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, and based on the success of Legend, I'm almost positive that it will, you know, continue its meteoric rise with PlayStation 3.
Tomb Raider Legend was a large endeavor in terms of scoring. We did almost 4 hours of music. We used a very comprehensive set of technologies. I have a render farm. I'm probably the most demanding person in the whole production. I have a 9-PC render farm, which I used to orchestrate music. So with Legend, there is so much work that some of it was pre-investigative, that we went out and looked at the different locations in the game. There's a variety of different destinations, and we took a close look at them, and I tried to understand different musical styles of each region, like what's the local instrument in Bolivia, or what's the local music in Himalaya, and so on. So in Himalaya, for example, we got Himalayan singers in the game. In Peru and Bolivia, I took the local instruments and learned to play them. Pan flutes, for example, a lot of ethnic flutes as well I learned to use. And so it was mainly that I think the hard part about the game was that we wanted both something contemporary and something orchestral. So on one hand, I had to do very contemporary stuff, like what's out right now in pop and rock. And on the other side, I had to do orchestration as well, which is my background, orchestrating. So it was a huge endeavor in a variety of different musical styles and a very deep journey into ethnic music of various sorts.
So, you know, the decision of Crystal Dynamics to take on Tomb Raider was one that obviously I didn't have any input in. And I think, again, if you want to wind back slightly, my role in IDOS at that stage had come to a kind of a natural end. Tomb Raider, Angel of Darkness wasn't the success everybody had hoped it was going to be the success. It still sold well over 1 million pieces and made lots of money, but it wasn't kind of where it was. At that time, IDOS itself was going through a tough time, and somebody had to take the sword, and my head was the highest above the parapet, and it got taken, which, you know, I mean, I said earlier on, emotionally I'd kind of done with Tomb Raider, so it was probably time to actually move on and say, listen, enough is enough, I'm going to go and do my own thing and hopefully create the next Tomb Raider. So then it's kind of looking back from having the benefit of looking then and saying, should Cork have continued to do that? Well, you know, it would have been nice, but I don't blame IDOS for what they did. If I was then left at IDOS and I'd just got rid of, you know, me, I'd have said, you know, it needs to come away from me. We've all blown out of Tomb Raider. We're all Tomb Raidered out. We've all been with it too long. Give it to somebody else to do. Maybe we'll do another one in 2 years' time, but give us a break. Let us just go and, you know, do something. Go and create another game. Just do whatever. In the meantime, let somebody like Crystal, who Eidos owned, wasn't really doing anything at the time, very competent developer, let him have a go. So I don't, you know, I understand the decision completely. And from a kind of a commercial standpoint, it was the right signal to send at that stage to their investors that, listen, we've dealt with the problem, we've got rid of Jeremy, that's problem number one. We're going to take the product away from Core, so we're going to take it to Crystal, utilize Crystal, which is a very expensive facility, but because it's expensive, they're going to do a great job, and they're going to do this. And so it kind of all played quite nicely into the big, bad, dirty world of commercialism, which is where on the creative side of any video gaming it's tough, because you don't want to know about commercial sides. You just don't want to give up your kind of your birthright. So, you know, I don't have an issue. I would have done the same.
Character was always meant to be sexy only because of who she was, right? Just through what she does. Just being a very cool and in control sort of person who's very competent, very demure, right? These sorts of things make her attractive. And I don't think that the character, right, would ever get into like Maxim style poses, you see. I don't think that she's the sort of character who would overtly use sexuality, right, to get her way. I think that she's above that. She doesn't care. She's just get on with what she's supposed to do. So some marketing stuff, and a lot of people generally just want to show her in you know, more sexually overt poses and clothing. And I think those things are just bad in general and weaken who she is, right? So I wasn't very keen on a bunch of the things that were done of her sort of lounging around half naked and so forth, which I think that, you know, that's just not Lara Croft. So I think that there's a lot less of that going on these days, which is good.
Well, the biggest challenge when you change Lara's look is you get a room filled with people, both men and women, putting on the table their idealized woman. So you find out some people, you know, are very particular about hair. Some people are particular about eyes. There was one person who had an issue with her knees and still maintains an issue with the new Lara's knees to this day. So getting past that sort of everyone's personal fantasies and wish fulfillment, you know, freaky as that may be, just getting people to get on the same page of here's the characterization, here's the origin, you know, what are the key points, and sort of getting that collaborative agreement, like, yes, like, you know, she may or may not be for me, but this does fit the goal. So
Microscoring is, when I originally came to Crystal, I came as a PhD scholar in microscoring, actually. It's a term I invented for my PhD studies, which is essentially about breaking the musical score down in very, very small components. One of the problems we have in games when it comes to scoring is that, first of all, games have a hard time conveying emotion, which I think is one of my key roles as a composer. But we also have a hard time getting the music to complement the game experience. So when you move around in a game environment, the music will normally just be static, like, all right, it's dangerous, we have dark music going on. But for me, it's more important to have music that adapts to whatever change there is in the game. So if you start running in a specific space, or if there's change in atmosphere, whatever, or in light, or anything small happens, that needs to be complemented. Just as a motion picture, you know, when you watch a movie, you'll just see things happen as they go along because you score it and everything is prefixed. So as a composer, you can say, now they're moving there, and you can do that. But with a game, you don't know because the player will do whatever he wants. So the thing we try to envision is how to break the score down in very, very tiny small scores called microscores. And these scores will be like put together in real time as the player does different stuff. So for example, in the next games we're working on, and that goes for Lithium as well, if you look at a particular thing in the game, there'll be a score for that just by turning your head around. Or if you start moving fast, there'll be a score for that. So we have a variety of different small micro scores that adapt to the player and what he does.
So we'd been working on Tomb Raider at that stage for probably 8 or 9 months, so we were well into development. So, you know, the initial reaction was awesome. I can show you. I think we actually kept it, or my brother did. When we sent the game to get it approved by Sony, you have to send them a game overview, and that they then approve the concept. So we got an approval from the European arm of Sony. We sent the same thing to the US, and that was just basically a kind of a 4-page overview of Tomb Raider. It's going to be an action-adventure, third-person, female character. They rejected it. They actually turned it down. So we just persevered and kind of ignored it, to be honest with you. And I still see the guy that turned it down now, and I still remind him of it and say, you know, remember turning Tomb Raider down, you muppet. And it was, they saw, in the end, they saw the benefits of the game, obviously. And then, you know, that was turned out at a very early stage. Once we got a great demo of the game and people saw this, I think what people first and foremost saw was the 3D technology. And then they saw it was like, oh, it's got this girl in it who's got big boobs and looks great. I mean, it was the actual visual impact of on screen was so different to anything else you'd seen. So when you saw that, you kind of taking it all in was you know, it was just awesome.
So I think one of the things about Lara that makes her sort of more difficult for other people to make a character like her is, I think, you know, primarily because she was an attractive woman in the first game. Sort of, she was a babe, hot, right? And so, but the game was solid. And so a lot of people jumped to the bandwagon, well, I put a hot chick in my game and, you know, press button, instant million unit success, right? But a lot of times the games weren't so hot. So, you know, and since she sort of trailblazed, if you came up with a hot female character, no matter how good your game was, it was, oh, exploitation, you know, or you're trying to be a Tomb Raider game. So she set a bar that was pretty hard, I think, for a lot of people to hit in terms of you had to come out with a high quality game and just happen to have an attractive looking, you know, lead character. I mean, of course, a lot of stuff gets said about, oh, attractive female in games, but even the guy characters look pretty, you know, I guess hot if you're into such a thing. But I think that's the big reason. So she hit first, and it was a mixture of that and just, you know, quality. So I think Tomb Raider, I think from a game standpoint, in spite of sort of, you know, a bit of the blown out of proportion early Lara Croft models, I think it would have been a solid game. I definitely don't think it would have been such a cultural or sort of media bonanza. I think it would have been as successful if she was a little toned down. But if you actually go back and you look at the first Tomb Raider, she was pretty, you know, sedate might be too much of a word, but, you know, within the realm of reality. And, you know, she sort of changed a bit in a couple of games, but I definitely think a toned down Lara would still have been as much of a success. But certainly, you know, replace her with, you know, Larry Croft, and no, not so much a big a success.
The best memory of launching Tomb Raider 1 was at E3 in LA, right at the very beginning, when we were there and we were unveiling the real Lara to the audience as such. And I remember being backstage, as you can call it, backstage in our booth with the first Tomb Raider look-alike model that we brought on board, and ready to walk out with her in front of what appeared at the time thousands of people. I'm sure it was hundreds. But the moment in time was that it was hundreds of people in the audience there, and bringing her to the stage and basically unveiling her for the first time. And that was a magical moment. The reaction to the crowd was just like mind-blowing, never to be repeated again, experience as such. And to me, that was just an awesome part of the overall campaign that we put in place.
Number one, it wasn't really to change her look, you know, that the goal was to just kind of update her, just kind of take full advantage of what a PS2 can do, and what that would mean for her. So we actually, one of the first things we did that was really interesting is we took all the images of Lara Croft from the previous 6 games and lined them up, you know, the whole body and her face, and just kind of looked at, okay, what's the direction this has generally gone in, what are the consistencies over that period. And we just identified those and then just said, okay, now how great can we make her look using the full power of the PS2 and then the Xbox 360 and every other SKU we put her on. Probably the biggest challenge was developing consensus. You know, we had a lot of people who cared a lot about what the final result was going to be. I mean, as you can imagine, just about everybody has an opinion on what would look good and not look good, and what Lara should look like, what she shouldn't look like. So you know, there's a lot of passion behind it, and that's always, you know, it's a challenge and a blessing. But when we were done, you know, everyone felt like, okay, that's it, there she is. If you've never played Tomb Raider before, what you'll get, number one, is a kick-ass main character. someone who's extremely mobile and can shoot from just about any situation, and frequently has to. You'll get a lot of, in Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition, you'll get a lot of animals, wild animals, that are going to be a little angry with you for coming into their space that you'll have to fend off quickly and skillfully. You'll get ancient tomb puzzles with the ancient mechanisms that you have to overcome and solve and put back together in many cases in order to proceed through the game. And you'll get just, you know, at its core, you're going to get a lot of exploration. Everywhere you go is going to feel new. You know, everywhere you go is going to feel like you're the first person who's been there in a long time, and you're going to be alone in these empty, old, ancient spaces, trying to figure out how to get to the next step of the mystery, the underlying mystery you're solving. There will be some surprises. You know, the main thing is kind of the interesting stuff that comes up when we try to marry the new mechanics that we've developed for Tomb Raider with your memories of Tomb Raider Anniversary. And, you know, I think in most instances, if not all instances, what you'll find is you're going to get your memory, you're going to get your nostalgia, you're going to get those locations you remember, those encounters you remember, but they're just going to be executed at a much higher, you know, kind of production level. And all the puzzles, all the traversals have been rethought to make sure that we preserve the spirit, but make them as compelling and deep as we can make them. So.